Welcome to the channel, and thank you for joining us today. If you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss out on our exciting stories. We've got something truly special for you today, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. Before we dive in, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love hearing from all over the world. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you're ready for tomorrow's story. Now, let's jump into today's adventure. The shocking moment a royal guard defied an American officer. The gleaming black motorcade smoothly swept through the gates of Buckingham Palace, stopping with practiced precision near the visitor's entrance. A light morning mist hung in the air, softening the edges of the historic stonework and enhancing the vibrant colors of the meticulously maintained gardens. The usual mixture of tourists and official visitors filled the palace grounds, their excited murmurs creating a constant background hum as the day's events unfolded. Diplomatic flags fluttered atop the vehicles, signaling the arrival of the American military delegation for a high-level international meeting. Curious onlookers paused, their phones raised to capture the moment, unaware of the tension that would soon unfold before them. Lieutenant Colonel Jackson Hayes of the United States Marine Corps was the first to step out. With military precision, he adjusted his uniform, each medal and ribbon on his chest telling the story of a career spanning multiple combat zones. His expression remained neutral, professional, but his eyes betrayed a hint of dismissive impatience as he surveyed the palace grounds. He scoffed to Major Davis, who stood by his side. All this pomp and circumstance for a glorified meeting. We could have hosted this at the Pentagon and saved everyone the theatrics. Major Davis offered a non-committal nod, already distracted by the iconic figure standing at attention nearby, a royal guard in full ceremonial regalia. Sergeant William Barrett stood perfectly still, his eyes fixed forward in the disciplined thousand-yard stare perfected through years of service. Hayes watched him with undisguised skepticism, unable to understand the purpose of standing motionless in such a high-profile setting. Without warning, he veered from the group, breaking from the carefully choreographed arrival to approach the royal guard. Hayes circled Sergeant Barrett slowly, his eyes scanning every detail of the uniform, even making a sarcastic comment. Incredible detail. I wonder how practical that bear skin hat would be in an actual combat zone. Before Barrett could respond, a polite yet firm voice called out from behind. "Lieutenant Colonel, if you'd kindly rejoin your group, we have a rather tight schedule to keep." Hayes ignored the plea and continued his inspection, feeling both superior and critical of the ceremonial display before him. Little did he know, he was about to learn an important lesson in military discipline, one that would leave everyone, including himself, stunned. The tension in the air grew as Lieutenant Colonel Jackson Hayes continued to circle around Sergeant Chris Williams, the Royal Guard standing at attention. His skeptical gaze never wavered from the man in front of him, who, despite the close inspection, remained as still as a statue. Hayes's voice broke the silence, sharp and challenging. "In the Marines, we train to respond to threats, not stand still like mannequins for tourists," he remarked with a smirk, clearly dismissing the whole idea of ceremonial duty. The crowd, sensing the unusual interaction, began to gather, some even pulling out their phones to record. Hayes could feel the eyes of the onlookers on him, but he cared little. This was about making a point. What's the use of standing like this? You're not prepared for real combat if all you do is hold your position without reacting to what's around you, Hayes added, his tone dripping with disdain. He stepped even closer, almost within arm's reach of Sergeant Williams, still standing motionless in perfect discipline. The unspoken rule that no one, not even a visiting military officer, should touch or come too close to the guards seemed to escape Hayes entirely. Sergeant Williams, unmoved and unfazed, did not flinch. His eyes remained locked forward, his expression as stoic as ever. The longer Hayes circled him, the more Hayes' frustration grew. "You're just here for show, aren't you? This whole routine, it's a joke," Hayes muttered, as if trying to provoke a response. But there was nothing. Sergeant Williams did not break, not even a muscle twitched. A diplomatic voice called out from the side, breaking the rising tension. "Lieutenant Colonel, Please rejoin your group. We have a schedule to keep, said Major Davis, trying to pull Hayes away from the increasingly awkward standoff. But Hayes was relentless. I'll be back in a minute, he said dismissively, brushing off the request. He wasn't done making his point yet. He leaned in close to Sergeant Williams, now inches away. Tell me, Sergeant, how does standing still help you in combat? When the bullets are flying, when the world's falling apart around you, do you just stand there, doing nothing? His voice carried loud enough for nearby tourists to hear, adding to the spectacle. But Sergeant Williams didn't respond. He remained silent, unmoving, his eyes still fixed ahead. It was clear to everyone, but not to Hayes, that discipline was more than just standing still. It was about control. The kind of control that was about to teach Hayes a lesson he wouldn't forget. The tension in the air was palpable, and Lieutenant Colonel Jackson Hayes felt his patience wearing thin. He couldn't understand it. The Royal Guard, the epitome of discipline, stood there, unwavering and unflinching, even as he continued his verbal assault. Sergeant Chris Williams had not given in, not even a slight twitch of movement. But Hayes wasn't about to let this go. His mind was set, and his words came sharper with each step he took around the guard. Hayes leaned in even closer, his face now inches away from Sergeant Williams. Tell me, Sergeant, Hayes said, his voice dripping with mockery, how does this ceremonial training help when you're facing real threats? You think standing like a statue in front of tourists makes you ready for war? He took another step forward, completely violating the space most would instinctively avoid. I mean, come on, you don't even respond when you're challenged. What good is that in combat? Hayes was almost shouting now, his eyes blazing with the fire of someone who believed his point was indisputable. The tourists had become increasingly uncomfortable, sensing the rising tension. Some backed away, while others filmed the encounter, eager to capture the spectacle. But Sergeant Williams? He didn't budge. His expression remained as neutral as it had been when Hayes first approached. His posture was flawless, his eyes locked in the unyielding stare that had been honed over years of service. Not once did he break character, not even as Hayes got closer and closer. A voice, calm yet firm, broke through the mounting tension. Lieutenant Colonel, called Captain Richard Wells, the Royal Guard commander, stepping forward. I think there's been a misunderstanding. He glanced at Sergeant Williams, who was still perfectly in position. Sergeant Williams is following Standing Order 157 nouns, which specifies that guards maintain their position and bearing regardless of external influence. The Queen's Guard operates under the authority of the Crown, not NATO's command structure. Hayes blinked, taken aback for a moment. This wasn't going how he expected. He tried to mask his surprise, but it was clear he hadn't anticipated the response. The harsh words died on his tongue. The crowd had gone quiet, and Hayes, for the first time, felt the weight of the situation. He had pushed too far, and now he realized he wasn't just facing Sergeant Williams. He was facing centuries of military tradition that he couldn't break with words alone. Sergeant Williams, Hayes muttered, his voice losing its earlier bite. I see now. But he trailed off, not fully able to admit it. In that moment, it wasn't just about military protocol. It was about respect. And Sergeant Williams had earned it without saying a word. The silence between Lieutenant Colonel Jackson Hayes and Sergeant Chris Williams grew thicker, heavier with each passing second. Hayes was a man accustomed to authority, a man who believed that his rank and experience in combat should command respect wherever he went. But Sergeant Williams wasn't responding to his taunts. He wasn't breaking his stoic position. Hayes's frustration mounted. His challenge had been ignored. His provocations met with the unwavering discipline of a guard who had seen much worse. You're just standing there, aren't you? Hayes muttered, his voice now quieter but tinged with disbelief. Do you even know what it means to engage with your surroundings? To be ready for anything? He paced back and forth, his boots thudding sharply against the stone pathway. Sergeant Williams did not flinch, not once. Every movement of Hayes seemed to be absorbed by the man's stillness. Hayes took another step forward, his anger burning through his words. In the Marines, we don't stand still. We adapt. We move. We fight. But you're here for show. Hayes jabbed a finger towards Sergeant Williams, but again, the Royal Guard didn't budge. The tourists gathered around them whispered nervously, some of them realizing the seriousness of the situation. No one dared to approach, unsure of what would happen next. It was then that Captain Richard Wells, the Royal Guard commander, intervened. His voice was calm but carried the weight of years of service. "Lieutenant Colonel, I must ask you to respect our traditions," he said, stepping into the tension. "Sergeant Williams is not here to perform for tourists. He's upholding an oath, one that extends beyond military chains of command. His duty is to the crown, not to you." For a moment, Hayes hesitated. He had pushed for a response. He had wanted to see if the man in front of him would crack, would show a hint of emotion. But Sergeant Williams had done something far more powerful. He had not been swayed by Hayes's rank, his insults, or his provocations. He had held his ground, unflinching, unyielding, and without a word spoken. Hayes stood frozen for a moment, the reality sinking in. His respect for Sergeant Williams, though grudging, was unmistakable. The ceremonial rigidity he had mocked now seemed like a strength, not in spite of his stillness, but because of it. And in that moment, Hayes understood something crucial. It wasn't about adaptability in the heat of battle, but about a deeper, unshakable discipline that transcended everything he had ever known. "Sergeant," Hayes finally said, the sarcasm drained from his voice, "I owe you an apology." He paused, looking at the guard's unbroken stance, now realizing the true meaning of his duty. As Lieutenant Colonel Jackson Hayes reluctantly acknowledged the unwavering discipline of Sergeant Chris Williams, the weight of the situation began to sink in. He had been so certain that his military background and rank would make him the one to set the tone. Yet, here he stood, a man who had seen countless combat zones, now humbled by the very stillness he had mocked. The lesson was clear, though it took a long moment to accept. Sergeant Williams wasn't just following orders, he was living them with a devotion Hayes had never understood until now. The tour continued, and the American delegation slowly moved toward the changing of the guard ceremony. But Hayes, now visibly shaken, was lost in thought. It wasn't just about the military protocol. It wasn't even about the Royal Guard's uniform or the silent stare of the man who had taught him something he hadn't even realized he needed to learn. It was about respect, something that couldn't be earned by rank alone, something deeper than tactics or battlefield experience. And in that brief but intense exchange, Sergeant Williams had shown him a kind of respect Hayes had never experienced before. As the group walked toward the exit, Colonel Mark Wilson, the senior American officer, placed a hand on Hayes's shoulder, a gesture that spoke volumes. "It's a hard thing to admit, but you've learned something valuable today," Wilson said, his voice calm but filled with understanding. Hayes didn't respond immediately, but his mind was racing, processing the events that had just unfolded. "Sergeant Williams," Hayes murmured as the group passed by, his voice quieter than before. The Royal Guard stood tall, perfectly still, his eyes locked ahead. Hayes's words, though not loud, carried a weight. There was no sarcasm, no challenge, just an acknowledgement of the quiet strength he had been too blind to see at first. "You have my respect." As the motorcade pulled away from Buckingham Palace, the tension that had defined the day seemed to dissipate. Hayes sat in the back, his face thoughtful, staring out the window. The rest of the delegation carried on, engaged in their own conversations. But for Hayes, the lesson was clear. Military effectiveness wasn't just about adaptability in combat zones. It was about discipline, focus, and unwavering respect for duty, qualities Sergeant Chris Williams had demonstrated in spades. The encounter wasn't just a diplomatic incident, it had been a wake-up call. For the first time, Hayes understood what true service meant, regardless of the uniform it wore. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's story. What do you think about the interaction between Lieutenant Colonel Hayes and Sergeant Williams? Do you agree with Hayes's initial perception of the Royal Guards, or do you think there's more to their ceremonial duty than meets the eye? We've seen how Sergeant Williams maintained his composure and discipline despite Hayes' provocations, which raises some important questions about respect, duty, and the value of tradition in modern military service. Have you ever had an experience where you initially misunderstood something, only to realize later that there was much more to it? We're curious to know what lessons you took away from this story. And if you think it's important to respect different military traditions and protocols, especially when cultures and values differ, let us know in the comments below. Your opinion matters to us. And if you're enjoying these stories, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you can be part of our community. We've got more exciting content coming your way, and we'd love for you to join us on this journey. Your feedback really helps us improve, so feel free to share your thoughts and any questions you have.